girl, your hand is about to crisp up and fall off. Like, chill out. Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today, what I've got for you is an October reading wrap-up and a couple leftover books from September that didn't quite make the last video. Let's get into it. So the first book that we're going to touch on is one that I read toward the end of September, and that is The Ministry of Time by Kaliane Bradley. This novel is about a woman, and she is in charge of a person who has come from the past and is now in the present for reasons that you'll find out if you read it. And, you just kind of get to watch the relationship between her and her person and then all of the other people. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's really funny at times and it's sweet and it's exciting. I really liked all of the characters. I thought it was just really cute the way that it was done. I don't know if cute's quite the right word, but it was cool. It was just a really memorable plot and story, and it felt like something that I hadn't read a million times before. Overall, I gave it about 4.5 stars. There were just some events at the end that felt kind of chaotic and not as perfectly planned as the first part of the book, so it was really good. I would totally recommend it. It just wasn't quite 5 stars. Okay, let's move on. The next book, which is another straggler from September, is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This book is a fantasy romance. It is very cute. I really liked the first half of the book probably, and then after that I just really it was good enough that I want to read the sequel. I think. We'll see. But it just made me mad toward the end, and it also felt uninspired. The romance just really ended up accelerating really quickly, and it kind of abandoned the cute startup that it had going. It just wasn't really for me. So other people have really liked this book. I just wasn't one of them. It's still good. If you're looking for a good fantasy romance that isn't really explicit, this is a good option for you. Overall, I gave it 3 stars. I will say though that the first half of the book was probably 4 or 5 stars. It was so good, and then it just went downhill for me. Let's move on. The next thing that I read was Silver in the Bone by Alexandra Bracken, another straggler from September. I promise we're almost done with those. This book was a very fun fantasy. It was kind of like Sarah J. Maas-esque without smut and stuff. The story was creative. There were a lot of really bold choices and things that really took me by surprise. So I really enjoyed how this book kept me on my toes and totally defied my expectations. I wasn't quite sure about it when I started, but just as it went on, I was more and more invested, and I will definitely be reading the sequel. One thing that I really liked about this book is the descriptions for certain scenes. I've read probably 10 to 15 Stephen King books at this point, and his books have never given me a feeling of genuine fear, but when I read some of the descriptions of scenes in this book, I was genuinely unsettled, and I was like, oh, it was spooking me out, and he doesn't achieve that, and he's the king of horror, so I feel like these were really good. Not that this book is horror at all, it was really nice. Overall, I gave this book 4 stars. I can't quite put my finger on it. I think it might have been the beginning of the book, but it was just missing that 5-star component. Good stuff. So the next book that I read, and the last September straggler, is Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. This was a bit of a genre change for me because I read so much fantasy this month. I'm actually getting sick of it. This book is technically science fiction, but I feel like it's better described as contemporary fiction, and it's even thrillery at times, but definitely contemporary fiction vibes. It is about a robot who is designed to pleasure its owner, if you know what I mean. This is an adult book. The robot is learning more and developing its consciousness. It's starting to grasp concepts like bodily autonomy and control and consent and that sort of thing. It's a really beautiful character study. I really enjoyed this story. Speaking as someone who has never experienced an abusive relationship, I think that the way that this abusive relationship was portrayed was really tasteful, because from what I've heard from other people is that, the abuser may be really kind and amazing at times, and then every now and then it just changes. Or maybe they're abusive much more often. Obviously that changes from person to person, but I think that this was a really good example of the kind of relationship that some people feel trapped in, because every now and then it's not that great, but a lot of the times it's fantastic. So yeah, I really appreciated reading that, and overall just a great book. I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I read, and the first October read, was Together We Rot by Skyla Arndt. This book was was a young adult book, which was nice because I did read a lot of adult books this month, and sometimes it's nice to just read something that's not quite so intense. I mean, this was still intense, but it was, you know what I mean. If you look at the cover of the book and you read the title, that is exactly the vibe that you get from this book. It's so earthy and dark and creepy, and I like it. There are nice cult vibes in this book. We've got people wearing like antlers and stuff. It's really atmospheric and it's very exciting. I don't think that I was bored ever. Like it keeps you on your toes, and there is a little bit of a romance. It's kind of cute, and Mothman was mentioned. As a West Virginian, gotta love that. We love a little Mothman appreciation. So it was fun. You know, it read like a young adult book, so I can't quite give it 5 stars, but it was very enjoyable. I gave it 3.5. The next book that I read was The Hollow Boy by Jonathan Stroud. This is the 3rd book in the Lockwood & Co. series, and I really enjoyed it. That's kind of expected. I'm sure if you've been on this channel before, you've heard me rave about the series. This book explores the addition of a new member to the Lockwood & Co. team and a very, very large paranormal disturbance and trying to find the source of that and take care of it. So, super fun. You've heard me talk about these books, so I'm not going to say too much, but it's great if you're looking for something that's just like a good fun time. This is it. I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I read was When the Moon Hatched by Sarah Parker. This is a book that a lot of people have raved about on the internet. So this book, it's just a conglomeration of every single fantasy romance stereotype that you can possibly think of, and it's not well done. You can take common tropes and put them in your story and do them really well, but these ones, they were just thrown in there and it felt really tasteless. The story was really predictable the entire time. It's kind of hard to explain without spoiling anything, but I was able to connect dots really quickly, and it didn't take me by surprise at all. The characters were just hollow husks of people. They didn't experience any growth. It was really just an excuse to think about like dragons and smut and fantasy, and it was bad. Like there are so many other fantasy books that you could read that are so much better. If you're looking for this type of book, it's done better so many times. Please spare yourself. This book is horrible. I gave it 1 star. I was just reading my notes, and like the more I read, the more residual anger is rising up in me. I hate this book. Okay, moving on to a nice one. We've got Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I read Shadow and Bone, and I was not a fan. I know a lot of people really like those books, but they were just not for me. And so I didn't realize that the author of Ninth House was the same author until after I read the book. And I was very pleasantly surprised by this book. It was so wonderful. It's really nice to see a creator that can be so dynamic with their work. So I appreciate that. This book is about a girl that can see ghosts, and she ends up in this really horrible accident. And then the hospital, she's approached by this man from Yale, and he's like, hey, you want to come be in this secret society? We'll give you money and boarding and education. And she's like, yeah. So we've got Yale campus, dark academia with ghosts, and there's a murder, and we have to figure out what's going on. We've got a missing person who has been missing, you know, prior to the beginning of this book. And it's just a blast. I really like it. I really like the characters in this book. I feel like they're unique. It was just nice to read some characters that I felt like I hadn't read a million times in other stories. Overall, I gave this book 3.5 stars, but I think I might honestly bump that up to 4 because it's been a couple weeks since I read it, and I feel very affectionate toward the story. I feel like I like it more after some time has passed, so probably gonna bump that up. The next book that I read this month was Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. This book was a fun one. If you're someone who likes to just do some light reading, like a little bit of jokes here and there, like a fun little story, nothing too heavy, this might be good for you. They're making it into a TV show, and I feel like that would be a much more digestible medium for me because I just felt like I was spending so much time listening to the audiobook for this, like hours and hours of my time. And I felt like I was gaining nothing from it because all it really was just a bunch of goofy people and goofy scenarios. This book is about an angel and a demon, and they are supposed to be ensuring that the Antichrist does what he's supposed to do, but they get him mixed up, and it's funny, okay? It's just not really my style, so I gave it 3 stars, and I think other people would definitely like it more. I can't deny that the writing was really fabulous. It just wasn't my type of book. The next book that I read was A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle Jensen. This book was so good. Oh my gosh. It had me on the edge of my seat. I was excited. I was invested. I could not put this book down. It's so good, okay? My only gripe that I will bring up is that this book, you know, it's a fantasy, but it's also a romance, okay? And sometimes romances are tasteful and they make sense. This one, our girl, she literally almost burned her hand off, and then immediately, while she was still like in pain and going to get it taken care of, she was like, Bjorn is so hot, and she was like swooning over him. I was like, girl, your hand is about to crisp up and fall off, like chill out. And there were so many scenarios like that. I feel like the romance was just not executed very well, and I think that it actually took away from the story at times, I guess just because it wasn't really my style. So there's that. But this book, fabulous. If you like your books a little spicier, you will love this. Like, it is so good. The plot twists, I'm not even gonna say anything else. It's just so good. And if you are a person who can deal with a little bit of spice in your books. One thing I will say that is kind of strange about this book is that it is the same type of book as the ACOTAR series, and the main character's name is Freya, and then in ACOTAR the main character's name is Feyre. And in both books, both characters are very self-sacrificing. Like, they'll self-sacrifice even if the people in their life that they're caring for are treating them badly. And so I kind of feel like Freya is Feyre, but it was still fun. I'm not gonna complain. Feyre's pretty cool. Just a little bit annoying at times though. Dude, could you please just get mad at your family when they're literally putting your life on the line for no reason? Overall, I gave this book 4 stars, and I took 1 away because it was just way too in your face with the spice. It wasn't for me. The next book I read was 11/22/63 by Stephen King. This book is about a guy that goes back to the 50s to try, well, the 60s. He goes to the 50s and then to the 60s to try and save President Kennedy from being assassinated. When I was listening to the audiobook for this, I heard what he was setting out to do, and I was like, are we being serious right now? Like, we're really writing a book about this? But then I just kept reading. Well, I kept listening, and it was so good. This is one of my favorite Stephen King books. I don't really like all of his books. I like a select few a lot, and then the rest are just kind of meh. This book, so good. It's a chonky book, okay? So we've got this man. His overarching goal is to help Kennedy, but he goes on a bunch of side quests on the way, and it's really entertaining. You get to watch his character develop and come to terms with his morality. Does he prioritize himself over the good of the future and that sort of thing? Like, it's just... It was really good. I really appreciated it. I wasn't expecting it to, but it had a cute little romance in it, and I love that. When I tell you this romance was cute, it's not like, oh, haha, they're so cute. It's like they were soulmates. I will admit, though, that this book does have some plot holes. I can't really explain the plot hole without spoiling something, but there are 2 big holes in the main character's reasoning and also a side character's reasoning. And it's like, if you just sit down and think about it for a second, like, a lot of the stuff that you did was completely unnecessary because you're stupid. So for that, I had to take a star, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I read was Hellbent, which is book 2 in the Alex Stern series, which is the Ninth House sequel. So again, by Leigh Bardugo. In this book, Alex and Dawes are setting out to get Darlington back. It again has just a wonderfully crafted mystery with twists and turns. So enjoyable, so thoroughly enjoyable. And I even liked this more than Ninth House. I gave it 4 stars immediately, which Ninth House started at 3. You know, maybe Ninth House should stay at like 3.5, because I do think that Hellbent was a little bit better. I struggle with rating books sometimes because I'll give something 4 stars and then I compare it to another 4-star book and I'm like, nah, that book is so much better. This should be 3 stars. But then I'm like, I look at my other 3-star books and it's like, no, it's not that bad. So the 5-star rating system is kind of dog water, but it is what it is. Anyway, I gave this book 4 stars. I really like Alex's character. She also has a very complex moral system, and I appreciate it. I like when the story isn't like, oh, there is good and evil. It had so much depth when the character is interpreting and analyzing and kind of applying their own system, I guess. It's cool. It's cool, and Alex is cool, and I like the series, okay? I'm also really sad because the 3rd book is probably not going to be released until 2026, so I have to sit here and wait for it. I think really why it wasn't a 5-star though is because there were certain events that happened and I felt like they deserved more time than they got. It just felt like the characters weren't really like meditating on certain events, and time was just kind of skipping or passing really quickly and we were just going, which is nice because it keeps you engrossed in the story, but I was also like, man, I want those character interactions. Give me the character interactions. So I felt a bit cheated there, but still a really, really good book. Very fun. And with that, that is my October reading wrap up. If you'd like to like the video and maybe subscribe, I would appreciate that. I'm growing channel, 12 whole subscribers. I know, pretty crazy. But yeah, I would appreciate it. So thanks for being here, and I will hopefully see you next time.